Amnesty is as good for those who give it as for those who receive it. It has the admirable quality of bestowing mercy on both sides. Victor Hugo, Les Miserables. All right, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right, folks, what do we got going on? First, apologies for yesterday. No show. I know what happened, DL. I overslept. I know, like 47. Like, dude, you're oversleeping at 47. You should have worked that out when you were 20, right? Yes. It may have had something to do with the fact that the night before, Saturday night, um, my son went to bed and I was like, I'm not feeling tired right now. I'm gonna go play some Minecraft. And so I went and I was like, I'll just play for a couple hours or something, like an hour or two. And at 1 o'clock, I was like, oh, it's 1 o'clock. I better wrap this up. So I was like, let me just finish a couple of other things. And then the next time I looked at the clock, it was after 5. It was like 5:05 or something. And I was like, "Oh." And I was like, I just pulled an all-nighter playing Minecraft, which my son will eventually play, and he will get up and, and be counterproductive to all the things that I was doing. Because like, he's 6, so when we play games, we have different vision of what should be happening. But, anyway, so I think doing that got me all messed up, and so I ended up waking up a couple times the next morning, and then I was like, "All right, I'll get up in just a minute." And then the next thing I knew, it was like 7 o'clock yesterday, and so then I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "I'm not gonna be able to put together a show in a half an hour," because I still have to like get out of bed, get dressed, brush my teeth. So I was like, "Yeah, it's not gonna happen." And then I thought, well, maybe I can do it during my lunch. And that didn't work out either because I simply was just too busy. So, apologies for that. Anyway, as far as announcements though, I got some interesting news for you guys. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., clear your schedules. I'm gonna have Larry Sharp on. You know Larry Sharp out of New York, ran for office, good dude, libertarian. So I invited him to come on the show and talk to me about Zoran Mamdani. And you might say, like, well, why would you want to talk about him? Well, I've been doing these Rumble premium shows with Zoran Mamdani. And what I've been, well, not with him, but about him. And I'm literally walking through his entire platform, just one by one by one, just going down and saying, all right, here's my take on what he's promoting or presenting here. And, but I'm not a New Yorker. I've visited New York City and that's it. Like like there is no claim whatsoever to have any understanding of New York City. That doesn't mean that I can't talk about policy ideas in general and say like here are my thoughts on this, but I'm going to be limited in how I can kind of say, okay, here's this idea, it's a bad idea, and in this particular context, here are some of the pitfalls or things that we may see that that are problematic, or maybe even some good things, whatever. So I figured I'd reach out to somebody who is familiar with New York City. And so I'm going to have Larry Sharp on. We're going to talk about it. And we're not going to talk necessarily about what I'm doing specifically. We're just going to be talking about him, some of his policies, and get perspective from somebody who actually knows New York. So look forward to that tomorrow, 11 a.m. And I'll do a regular show in the morning as well. So we'll try to carry on as normal as possible for the rest of the week. But we are having an off schedule show tomorrow at 11. It'll be 11 till whenever Larry decides he's done. So we've got that. Look forward to that. That'll be fun. In the comments, yes. Just want to point out my VA lady, great help to the show. Look her up, see what services she can provide you. Points out that DL needs 20 different chatters during the live stream. Here's the link. Come say hi in the chat. So if you have an account on Rumble, then you don't have to have a paid account. Then do me a favor. If you're watching the show, just jump in over on the Rumble side. Even if you're on some other jump over on the Rumble side, throw in a quick comment, help a brother out. Okay. I need 20 chatters by the end of the month. Currently got 7. So 7 of the people that are the most frequent viewers of the show. You know, if you've not said anything in the chat this month. So if you haven't, just pop in and say hi. Or if you've got some critique, throw that in there as well. Or if you've got some praise, you can throw that in. Just anything, just to help a brother out. All right, let's get into this. What are we going to talk about today? So I'm going to defend Massie yet again. Now, let me preface this. Thomas Massie is out of Kentucky. He is not my congressman. It's unfortunate. I would actually like him to be. He is probably, in my opinion, the best congressman that we've had in, I don't know, decades, long time, very long time. Okay. I don't know exactly how long, but quite a while. What makes him so great? Number one, he means it when he says he's conservative. He means it when he says he wants to reduce government. He means it when he says, I want to protect your civil liberties. We know he means it because he takes a lot of flack for it, because he'll do something and then he'll come out and he'll explain why he did it. Now, that's one of the things that I think that really gets people to really support and like him, is that he doesn't just vote according to how people think, people in the liberty sphere think he should vote. He comes out and he explains his vote, and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. Because sometimes his votes seem like they may be, counter to what he's trying to accomplish or what he's telling us he's trying to accomplish. But then when he gives the explanation, we're all like, oh, yeah, of course, that makes sense. Good for you. Okay. So he is a solid Congress. If we had a Congress full of Thomas Massies, we'd have a way better Congress, way more effective, way more functional. Um, they wouldn't necessarily all agree, although that wouldn't be so bad given his position on many things. But they would at least be intelligent. They would read the bills. They would want to do things the right way. They would care about what their constituents say. They, wouldn't necessarily be beholden to big money, wherever that comes from, whichever lobbyist is knocking at the door, right? Like, we would have a better Congress. But yet, people still find an opportunity to complain about it. And one complaint that I see a lot that doesn't get much attention is people go, "Oh yeah," like, people like me will say, "Hey, Thomas Massie's, he's a great congressman. Why is Trump going after him? This is ridiculous. Why is he creating a PAC to try to unseat him? Why is APAC trying to spend $300,000-$400,000 to unseat him? This is nonsense." And people will immediately go, "Oh yeah? Well, if he's so great, what legislation has he ever gotten passed?" And I'm like, and that was an interesting question. And I think the answer to that is not going to be one that people who are asking it are prepared for or even want to hear, because it kind of means that they don't know what they're talking about. So I happen to find something. This is govtrack.us. You can go there. They literally have report cards on all the members of Congress. And so let's take a look. So their report cards. Now this one is for 2024. So it's going to cover the 118th Congress, the current Congress that we have. And it says, I love this. These statistics dissect the legislative records of members of Congress during the 118th Congress from January 2023 to January 2025. A higher or low, I love this. This starts out, a higher or lower number doesn't necessarily make a legislator any better or worse or more or less effective than other members of Congress. We present these statistics for you to understand the quantitative aspects of legislating and make your own judgments based on what legislative activities you think are important. Keep in mind that there are many important aspects of being a legislator besides what can be measured, such as constituent services and performing oversight of the executive branch, which aren't reflected here. So, in other words, we're starting off and we're saying, like, look, just because you see a big number or a small number, that doesn't really say anything about how effective they are. That just means they got a big number or a small number. This is quantifying it. We're putting numbers to things. And so, what kind of things that, so look at report cards for all the representatives, House Republicans, House Democrats, those serving 10 or more years. And then they do the same thing for the senators as well. Right. And you've got here, so they'll say things like, all right, bills co sponsored, the number of bills co-sponsored by each legislator in the 118th Congress, all representatives. And then we've got most bills, right? And then we've got senators, most bills, and they go down to the fewest bills. So we can see that Representative Norton out of D.C. there, he he has the most bills, whereas Representative Weed, I think Weed or Wide, um, out of Wisconsin, he has the fewest. So, all right, and so this is just for this Congress. All right, and then we've got the senators' bills introduced. Okay, so this one was bills co-sponsored, and co-sponsored can be a lot. That's why Representative Norton has like 1,918. That means he's just joined in and co-sponsored that many bills. So down here, bills introduced. All right, number one, Representative Biggs, Arizona, 612 bills introduced, followed by Representative Norton, 128. And then we've got down here at the bottom, Lee Carter, Ruley, and Weed from Texas, Ohio, and Wisconsin, all with zero at the bottom of the barrel there. Bills out of committee, and let's see, committee positions, co-sponsors, et cetera, et cetera. So ideology score. So they have quite a bit of metrics here for us to look at. So I thought, since everybody's so worried about which bills Thomas Massie has gotten, he has sponsored and gotten all the way through to enacting into law. I figured I would take a look because I was curious. I was like, all right, let's explore this idea. So we look and we see that Representative Andy Biggs, who we just talked about a moment ago, his report card says that if we go down here, bills introduced, right? He's introduced the most bills compared to all representatives in the current Congress. He introduced 612 bills. Man, this guy must be phenomenal, right? 612 is a big number. Okay. Well, let's see here. Let's go back. I got to bounce around a little bit here. Laws enacted. Biggs introduced one bill that became law, including via incorporation into other measures in the 118th Congress. One. So 612 to one. Okay. Now, I'm not dogging on him. I'm just kind of pointing out that's a bit of a gap. He submitted 612, one ended up becoming law. Now, some of those bills, because Congress is still in session, it's possible that he may get more enacted later. But currently, as of July 8th, he has one bill enacted out of 612 for this current congressional session. All right. So if we go back up here, sorry to bounce around a little bit here. Let's see here. Co-sponsored the 30th most bills by co-sponsoring 409. Okay, so a busy man. But here's the real question. For all of you Thomas Massie haters, how many of you even know who Andy Biggs is? Come on, don't lie. Don't lie. You have no idea who this man is. Unless he's your representative. If you're in Arizona, District 5, which is where he's out of, you should know him, but there's a chance that you won't because a lot of people don't know who their representatives are. If you're in Arizona, you might know him depending on whether or not he gets mentioned a lot through media and whatever else, online and whatnot. So if he's got like some sort of popularity in Arizona, then you might know who he is. But more than likely, if you're hating on Massie, you ain't never heard of this man. Even though to you, supposedly the idea of how many bills, get passed or introduced or whatever, if that number is allegedly important to you, I would expect you at least know this man's name. Now, who you should really know is Representative Don Bacon out of Nebraska. Why is that? Well, if we go down, he actually has the most laws passed. So he wrote the most laws compared to all representatives. Bacon introduced 9 bills that became law. 9. Here they are: Space Force Legacy, Multipolar Deterrence Research, Strategic Defense Fellows Act, Bipartisan Keep America Open Act, Fighter Force Preservation Act, Air Force Future Force Design, Strategic Defense Fellows Program Act, Military Cyber Defense, Defense Hackathon. Are you noticing a trend here? Anybody notice one? If you said military, bingo. This man wrote like 9 bills that got that ended up into law. He's got the most for this congressional session, and they're all related to our military industrial complex, our complex. Yes, complex. That's what I meant to say. I was thinking of something else. Our military industrial complex. All 9 of them, I think. Well, maybe the Keep America Open Act. Maybe that's something else. I'd have to look at it. But just by the title alone, the rest of them, you're pretty clear what they are. So 9 bills. So ask yourself, when haters come across and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, how many bills has he put into has he got enacted into law?" You can go, "Well, 0." Now tell me which Congress member has got the most bills enacted into law this session. Just throw that out there. Ask him, like, who is it? Hey, and now it's on the internet, so people could go look it up pretty quickly. But the chances are they don't know, right? Because this is a man that's out of Nebraska. How many people that pay attention to politics know? Let's see, Nebraska's second district representative. How many people in Nebraska know the second district representative? Because it's pretty common for people to not know even their own representative or representatives elsewhere in the state, much less some representative outside of the state. So, why am I pointing this out? Well, Don Bacon has the most pieces of legislation that he authored that went into law, 9 of them. Andy Biggs has introduced the most by far, 612. Again, this Congress, with only 1 being enacted. And then, if we want to look at just how many of Don Bacon's pieces of legislation that he's introduced altogether, well, we can get that number 2 introduced. He's introduced the 13th most bills compared to all representatives. He's tied with somebody else. Bacon introduced 65 bills. So he introduced 65 bills, and out of those, 9 of them were passed, all of them to the military industrial complex. Now, presumably, a lot of the people that are hating on Massie will say that they're for small government, or that we should, maybe have a good military, but we don't need to be spread out all over the place, or maybe we can reduce some spending. It depends, because these are mostly going to be conservative people. So it depends on how conservative they are. But you should ask them. You should, hey, how many? How many should Thomas Massie have authored? What's the number exactly? And how many does the person who has the most? How many do they have? How many for the person who has the most introduced? How many do they have? Do you know these numbers? And someone might go, It's not my job to know about some random. Whoa, no. If you're making the argument that Thomas Massie is a bad Congress member because he hasn't gotten the most bills passed, right? Then you should probably know who has. Otherwise, what are you comparing to? You're making stuff up, right? Because you don't know anything about who has the most, why they have the most. You don't know anything about that. So I think it's a canard altogether. People are just saying that. And it's really funny because I had a friend years ago. He's a Democrat, and he would complain. He would be like, I think it was a Republican Congress at the time, and he's like, "This is the most do nothing Congress," and I'm like, "Well, that sounds good to me. Like, I don't know why that's a bad thing." And he's like, "Well, they don't do anything. They're just arguing and this and that." And I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "They should be passing laws." I'm like, "About what? What laws can you tell me right off the top of your head that they should be passing?" And he didn't know. And I'm like, well, if you don't know, how can you complain? Like, you should have a list of like 10 bills. Or okay, maybe not 10, at least 5. You should be able to say, here are 5 things that I think, Congress should be doing before I start saying, do nothing Congress. The whole problem here is that people are looking for superficial things to justify their anger or whatever. So they're mad at Thomas Massie because he didn't support the most recent big beautiful bill. And I was like, "Oh, I can't believe you Trump had a mandate." We've talked about the mandate before, how that doesn't, like people say, "Oh, Trump's got a mandate because he won the election." And okay, well then everywhere else where you have an executive, like a mayor or a governor, they have a mandate too if they want. That's how this works. Also, where you have the legislative, so you have you have your House and you have your Senate at the federal level, you have it at the state level, and then you have your city council at the local level. They have a mandate too because they also won an election and they campaigned on doing certain things. I will do this. I will do that. I won't do this. I will tell you that. Whatever, right? They campaigned on certain things and people said, I like that person. I'm going to vote for them. They have a mandate as well. You don't get to just say the president has a mandate and everybody else has to succumb to whatever he wants. Because if that's the case, why the hell would we vote for anybody else? Literally, just vote one person, make him king. If that's what you want, make him king. But I promise you, I know some MAGA people out there are like, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. You say that now until the king gets everything he wants. Then you're going to find out this wasn't such a good idea. Basically, this arguments against Thomas Massie boil down to ignorance. Okay. How many bills somebody got, that they authored that went into law? That doesn't say anything. People like to think it does. They're like, oh, well, that means he couldn't convince all of his peers. Okay. Why is it his job to be convincing? Don't you know your role? Your role as a citizen is to reach out to your constituents. I'm sorry, to reach out to your representatives, because you're their constituent and tell them, I want you to vote on this. I don't want you to vote on this. That is your job. They are your employees. And yet you're like, okay, this one person is supposed to convince, 434 other people. That's his job. And if he can't do it, well, then he must be a bad congressman. Okay. Well, if you can't convince your one representative to do something, to vote for something or against it, what does that say about you? Right? Are you just a crappy citizen? Right? Because you couldn't even convince one person. You want Thomas Massie to convince 434 people. You can't convince one. Huh, that's interesting. Don't like it when the tables are turned like that, do you? I doubt that any of the grandstanders, the real grandstanders, okay? Thomas Massie he's people say that he's a grandstander, but that's really just some BS garbage that they make up. The real grandstanders who oppose Massie, I doubt that most of them could tell you who had the most bills enacted, the topics that covered those bills, and then most importantly, whether or not they agree or disagree with that legislation and why. So I want you to think about that for a second. Somebody's criticizing Thomas Massie. So ask him, do you know who Don Bacon is? Just ask him that. Like, who's Don Bacon? I'm like, how would I know? More than likely is going to be their answer. Well, if passage of legislation is so important to you, don't you think it's reasonable for you to know the person who has passed the most bills out of Congress as of right now? Don't you think that you should know that? Well, okay. And then they'll probably make up some argument, right? You say, "No, no, no." You hold them to the fire. You say, "No, no. You started this. Let's take it to its proper conclusion. Let's see how much you actually know about the argument you are making." So, you don't know who Representative Don Bacon is. You don't know that he's passed 9 bills currently in Congress, and when I say he's passed, I mean he's authored. I'm using that as shorthand to say he's authored 9 bills that went on to be signed by the president, okay? You don't know the topic of those bills, and so you certainly can't tell me whether or not you agree or disagree with the legislation. So ultimately, you're grandstanding about Massey because you're acting like a little petulant child, stomping your feet because he didn't do what you wanted him to do. But he did do what his constituents wanted him to do. That's why they keep voting him. He's been there since 2012. He's been there for over 10 years. About 12 years or so. And for 12 years, he keeps getting reelected, even when people run campaigns against him. In his last election, he ran against, I didn't run, he didn't really run against, but APAC spent like $400,000 to try to unseat him, and they failed. He won his seat again. Why? Because he communicates with his constituents. He comes out and he tells you, I voted yes for this, I voted no for this, and here's why. And people like him. Another reason that people like him is because he's just personable. I want you to watch this video here real quick. All right. This is him on Theo Vaughn's show. Let's check this out.
I'll tell you right now, this would be 50% of solving the problem. Get rid of the giant bills. Okay. The omnibus bills, the continuing resolutions, and even the big, beautiful bill.
Bring up omnibus bill. We looked it up the other day when Mr. Vance was here, but I just want to go over it again. An omnibus bill is proposed law that covers a number of diverse or unrelated topics. So it's not even really fair because you only get one vote on the bill.
Correct. What? And so typically an omnibus bill, it includes at least 12 other bills. Why not put that shit on the floor one at a time?
I agree.
And then that way, you can go to your representative or your senators and say, why did you vote for that? Right now, they can say,
that's crazy. What an amazing idea. Individual bills so that I could go to my representative and I could say, yo, why did you vote for that? Or why did you vote against that? And then I could go to the next one and the next one and the next one. Right. But here's why they put them all together. Here's the benefit, in quotations there.
Hey, well, Theo, I had to vote for it. It had a pay raise for soldiers, right? They literally will put a pay raise for soldiers in every freaking giant bill so that if you vote against it, you have to go back home and watch TV ads that say he voted against a pay raise for the soldiers.
Right. Even though he may have voted for 90 other amazing things on the bill, right?
Right.
And that was one thing that was tied in there that if you went this way,
Yeah.
So it's very interesting because Congress will cleverly put something in there that is basically a future gotcha, and all the Congress members know it. So then they have to make a decision and say, all right, if I'd like to be reelected, how will that apply? How will that play out based on my vote for this particular bill? Right? Can I afford to take that risk?
May have been like oxygen for grandmothers, right?
Literally, there probably is that in there.
But if you vote for oxygen for grandmothers, then they're not going to give. So I see what you're saying.
I voted against oxygen for grandmothers so many times, they can't even run that ad anymore. It doesn't even seem real.
Okay. So ultimately what they end up doing is they will put in something in there which kind of forces the hand. Hey, I had to vote for that, right? Because, I didn't want pay raise for soldiers. Now, look, I know my libertarians that are in the crowd. They're going to be like, well, we shouldn't be, depends on where you stand in terms of libertarian. But you might say, hey, we don't need to give a pay raise to soldiers, or we could give a pay raise if we would stop spending elsewhere, blah, blah. Just skip all of that for a second. And just we're focusing on how Congress plays games. Congress plays games here. And when people make these superficial criticisms of Thomas Massie, they're ignoring the games that Congress is playing. They're also ignorant about what Congress actually does and whether or not some of these quantities even matter. Okay. But he's kind of described Congress playing games because they put in a pay raise for soldiers. And if you vote against the bill because some of the other things were absolutely god awful, you might have been like, okay, well, the pay raise is not so bad. Maybe they deserve it, but I cannot justify voting for a pay raise with all these other things because they're so bad, right? If that's what you're trying to do. And so then maybe you vote no on it. And then later, nobody brings up and says, Fred voted no against this bill because it had 9 things in it that were god awful, but it had this one good thing in it that we tried to rope him and, use as a way to kind of force his hand to vote yes. Right? Like that's not how it's going to be explained to you. There's going to be like, he didn't vote for the soldiers. And we all know in America, everybody loves soldiers, right? We love our veterans. So that's a thing that's a way to play this game. But he goes on and he gives another explanation in a different video about Congress playing games as of recently. Now, mind you, he's on a podcast and he's talking about how Congress operates and some of the things that he does, that they do. And then now he's also in his other video, which I'm about to show you, where he's talking about, okay, here's how things played out. Because one of the other criticisms that people have, they're like, oh, he voted for the spending bill under Biden, but not under Trump. He must be a Democrat. You must be an idiot. But maybe you're just ignorant. Maybe I should be nice. You're just ignorant. You don't understand how things work because you're too busy making knee-jerk reactions and, following the, I was going to say something very inappropriate. And loving Trump, put it that way. So here's him explaining that most recent criticism.
Hi, Congressman Massie here. I thought you'd like to know about the fake fight that's going on in the House of Representatives right now over this CR. They're trying to pitch it as a conservative CR versus liberal Democrats. And even the Democrats are going along in the House. But let me tell you why that's a fake fight. They plan to pass it with all Republicans here in the House. But after we leave town, the Democrats are going to vote for it in the Senate. That's right. They're going to need about 8 Democrat senators to vote for this thing over in the Senate. That means that this deal has already been cut, that Mike Johnson has cut a deal with the Senate Democrats, Senate leadership, and even Hakeem Jeffries, he's in on this, so that they can pitch their fake fight here in the House. Now, why am I so certain this is going to pass in the Senate when it gets over there with 8 Democrats or however many Democrats they need? Well, Mike Johnson is sending us home a day early. We're going to vote on this thing and skip town. If you thought there was really a threat of them not passing it in the Senate, why would you leave town? The other thing that's going on is the Democrats have a retreat, an off-site retreat, where they're going to get together and party and have, guest speakers and stuff. And that starts tomorrow and runs through Thursday and Friday. Now, you think they're not going to let this thing pass? What would happen if, let's say, the Freedom Caucus decided to take the conservative stance on this CR and oppose it? Well, they would be about 30 or 40 votes short here in the House, the Republicans would. But Hakeem Jeffries wouldn't be able to pretend, along with Mike Johnson, in this fake fight, that this is a conservative versus liberal battle in the House. And he would just hand over at least 40 Democrats. And once you get to 40 Democrats, it'd probably be a whole lot more Democrats. So that's what's going on. It's all a fake fight. You're going to find this out when it goes over to the Senate and you have Democrats in the Senate voting for it. Now, here's the other thing a lot of people aren't telling you about this bill. In the FRA, stands for Fiscal Responsibility Act. I'm not saying it was that responsible, but in the FRA that passed a couple years ago under Kevin McCarthy, the deal that was cut between myself and others on the Rules Committee was that if you will guarantee a 1% cut in spending on any CR that goes past April 30th and put that into law, use the sequester language and put that into law, then we would raise the debt limit or suspend the debt limit for a period of time. I voted for this because a 1% cut seemed like a wonderful thing if they would go and do a CR for a full year, which seemed like almost a certainty at some point in the next 2 years. Well, here we are under Mike Johnson, and we've got the 1 year CR that they're going to do. It's actually a 6-month CR because we're already 6 months into this. And it's going to go past April 30th. It should trigger the sequester. But guess what? Mike Johnson's folks and lawyers have said, we're just going to ignore that. We're going to treat this continuing resolution as 12 appropriations bills or an omnibus for the purposes of this sequester, because it goes all the way to September 30th. In other words, they're saying this really isn't a CR for the purposes of that deal we cut 2 years ago. We're going to call this basically an omnibus in CR clothing, so we don't have to follow the law, the agreement that we did before.
Okay. So do you see how this played out? A lot of people are criticizing him. They're like, oh, well, he voted for this under Biden, but not under Trump. You're right, because under Trump, what they did was, what Congress did, Mike Johnson specifically, is they basically packaged this together and kind of in legal terms, they said, all right, we're gonna classify this as something else, as basically an omnibus bill instead of a CR. Because if it's classified as a CR, well, then we have to abide by that 1% that Thomas Massie negotiated. But if we classify it as an omnibus, well, then it's a different classification, and legally, we're not required to adhere to what was agreed to in the past. And they did this on purpose. But let me ask you, how many people who are criticizing Thomas Massie could have told you that? Zero. Like zero. Because all they're doing is they're looking at things very superficially, and they're speaking in ignorance. And to say, well, he's just voting no, he's voting against Trump, he's voting with the Democrats, blah, 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 blah. You're saying nothing. You're literally saying nothing. You're actually, I tell you what, you are saying something. You are telling everybody how ignorant you are of the process and how uninvolved you are to make sure that Congress is abiding by the law, abiding by past agreements, not playing silly little games. I mean, if you are in a position where you're like, hey, we're about to vote on this big, huge bill, it's a big deal, everybody's talking about it, we're trying to figure out, does it raise this or that? Does it lower? Is it benefit? Do the benefits outweigh the cost? We're having all these arguments about this particular bill. And then, as he said, they're going to send people home early. Why would you do that? Unless, like he said, you have confidence in how things are going to play out. Because if you send people home early and then the bill doesn't pass, and then you need people to rework the bill, to re-vote on the bill after it's been reworked, well, guess what? You need to call everybody back. So it wouldn't make sense to send everybody home early and with such a major piece of legislation on the docket, unless you had confidence in how things were going to play out. So when people start criticizing Thomas Massie, those are some questions that you can ask. You can ask him. You can say, what did he negotiate in order to get his vote on the last CR? What did he negotiate? And if people can't tell you, if they can't tell you a 1% reduction, a 1% cut in spending, then they don't know what they're talking about and they're not worth your time. And they should go back and do a little research before they start engaging in the conversation. It is time, and it's long past time, that Americans hold each other accountable, because if we can't hold each other accountable for our nonsense, we're certainly not in a position to hold our leadership, our representatives accountable. Now, with Thomas Massie, holding him accountable is not very difficult, because he is one of the few Congress members that literally will vote and then hit Twitter, his social media, and say, I voted no, or I voted yes, here's why. And so when people try to come in and say, oh, well, Thomas Massie always votes no, or Thomas Massie this or that, for us who support him, you're not going to tell us anything that we don't already know. In fact, you're probably behind. You probably don't, because the reason that we like him is not just because he votes the way we want, because we understand why he voted that way. We can understand, oh, you did vote for this back under Biden. Why did you do that? because I negotiated something that I thought would be beneficial going forward. And we can look and say, you're right, that was beneficial. Great negotiating. So skip all the noise. That's your defense. When people come at him, when they say how many pieces of legislation, say how many should he have? How many pieces of legislation did the person who had the most go through the process and become law? How many is that number? What's that number? And if they can't tell you 9, and if they can't tell you that it's Representative Bacon from Nebraska, then this whole line of argument is nonsense, and you should point it out to them, laugh, and then move on. That's what you should do. All right. Let's move into the America Party. Right? Sounds like good stuff. So we've got Elon here. He posted the other day, I think it was on July 4th, actually. Independence Day is the perfect time to ask if you want independence from the two-party, some would say uniparty, system. Yes. Yes, I would. Should we create the America Party? 65.4% of over 1 million votes said yes. 34% said no. Now, look, some people in the comments, they were like, how many of these people were from outside of the U.S.? It's a relevant question. So we don't know. However, what we do know is that polls in the United States consistently show that people, they welcome the idea of a third party in general, right? Like like a lot of people say, yeah, we should probably have a third party. How strong that is, their revealed preferences, after just simply being asked, hard to say. He went on and then later posted this: by a factor of 2 to 1, you want a new political party and you shall have it. When it comes to bankrupting our country with waste and graft, I think he meant grift, we live in a one-party system, not a democracy. This is true. Once you think about what you just heard from Thomas Massie, he said the right and the left, the Republicans and the Democrats, are playing games. They know when something is, they have a strong idea in many cases if something's going to pass. And you can tell by how they behave. Oh, they sent everybody home before it got to the president's desk. That must mean there's some confidence. There's some assurances that they have in order to make that call. He goes on to say, today, the America Party is formed to give you back your freedom. So how did people respond to this? Well, let's see. Donald Trump, he said, and he made a kind of a lengthy post. I'm going to read it here. He said, I'm saddened to watch Elon Musk go completely off the rails, essentially becoming a train wreck over the past 5 weeks. A train wreck. He's so exaggerative in his language. That's so funny. He even wants to start a third political party, despite the fact that they have never succeeded in the United States. The system seems not designed for them. You don't say. You mean like all the presidential debates where you explicitly make the rules so that third parties cannot get in? Right? Just say it. Like, we're not talking about like you made the rules and third parties just couldn't keep up. No, you actively went out and made rules such that third parties, you knew that they could not meet these because they don't make sense. Like, when you say, all right, here are the rules, we know that the big two are always going to get in. So any rules that you make are going to be for people behind them, third parties. Like, because none of the rules ever make it difficult for Republicans or Democrats. Like, nobody's ever been like, wow, the new rules that have updated in, it looks like the Democrats might not be able to get into the debates. It's only going to be the Republicans standing there by themselves. That doesn't happen. So it's clearly about keeping third parties out. Trump goes on to say, the one thing third parties are good for is the creation of complete and total disruption and chaos. And we have enough of that with the radical left Democrats who have lost their confidence and their minds. Republicans let me switch over here. Republicans, on the other hand, are a smooth running machine that just passed the biggest bill of its kind in the history of our country. It's a smooth running machine that required the assistance of Democrats and shenanigans, playing games, right? Like reclassifying it as an omnibus instead of a continuing resolution, so you didn't have to work within the boundaries that were agreed to a while back. 1% reduction in spending, right? That's your that's your smooth running machine there, Mr. Trump, because it looks like a smooth running snake machine. That doesn't sound cool, but I didn't have anything better to say. Continuing on. It is great. It is a great bill, but unfortunately for Elon, it eliminates the ridiculous electrical vehicle mandate, which would have forced everyone to buy an electric car in a short period of time. I've been strongly opposed to that from the very beginning. People are now allowed to buy whatever they want, gasoline-powered hybrids, which are doing very well, or new technologies as they come about. No more EV mandate. I have campaigned on this for hold on, let me get to the next slide here, for 2 years. And quite honestly, when Elon gave me his total and unquestioned endorsement, I asked him whether or not he knew that I was going to terminate the EV mandate. It was in every speech I made, in every conversation I had. He said he had no problems with that. I was very surprised. Okay. Elon has also said that he doesn't care about the mandate for years. It's on record. We can go look it up. We have. Just throwing that out. Additionally, Elon asked that one of his close friends run NASA. And while I thought his friend was very good, I was surprised to learn that he was a blue-blooded Democrat who had never contributed to a Republican before. Elon probably was also. I also thought it inappropriate that a very close friend of Elon, who was in the space business, run NASA when NASA is such a big part of Elon's corporate life. My number one charge is to protect the American public. Man, you want to talk about grandstanding. Just many words to say so little. He didn't say anything out of there. Nothing that was constructive whatsoever. And so how did people on X respond? And I want to do something here. I want to give me a second here. Let me okay, I'm going to click on this. I'm going to do a couple things here real quick here. Give me just a second as I readjust what I had here. Okay. So, oops, there we go. Okay. So how did people on X respond? Well, let's play my little music and let's see. All right. Austin Peterson, who I like, by the way, just throwing that out there. As a person experienced with third parties, I think just third party. I think it was just one. I say no, love you, Elon, but trust me, this is not the way. Start a caucus in the GOP. I'll take the lead. How's the Freedom Caucus doing? Is it bringing us more freedom? Are we reducing the debt? Are we reducing spending? How are the existing caucuses already doing? I'm saying. I'm not throwing shade at them. What I'm doing is I'm saying, like, I think that we have a problem with our political parties. They are entrenched with nonsense. They are full of corruption. Now, would a third party, another party that was brand new, do this, have corruption eventually? Yes, it will. But at least when it starts out, hopefully it wouldn't, especially if you got somebody like Elon running it. Let's see. What else we got? Oh, the redhead. My most favorite person. I say this as a libertarian. I'm sorry about that. I was just coughing. Third parties fail in America. The Uniparty designed it that way following Ross Perot. A third party candidate needs 15% in 5 Uniparty polls to debate. That is true. That's what I mentioned a moment ago. Like, they got to get 15% in 5 polls, right? In order for them to, well, guess what? Republicans and Democrats always get that. So who are you making the rule for? It certainly isn't maybe not all of the Republicans and Democrats. I mean, when they have a number of them. But those are the primary issues. Anyway, that said, we know infiltration is effective as the Democrat Party is overrun with communists. There we go again with just saying communist. I don't even, it's so crazy. You're supposed to be a constitutional expert, your words, not mine. And then you're once again, like everybody else, using communist flippantly. Not full of communists. Are there some in there? There might be a few that have some communist views, but I would say socialist is probably more accurate if we care about definitions, and we should. Who else do we got in here? The bunny, the political bunny. Why are you trying so hard? Why are you trying to hand Democrats the country when you work so hard to save it from them? I don't get it. Joe Macinis. Trump brought you on and treated you like family. Okay, that's a little creepy. This is politics, bro. And this is how you respond? Shame on you. I'm sticking with the man who's been right about everything. MAGA forever. I want to say this is probably not even a real person. I'm just saying. Or they need their head examined. American warrior. Respectfully, this is not the way to win for America. A better way is to restore the GOP to America first. How's that working out? Did you remember Congress after Doge and how they kind of were like, that's nice, Doge. You just stay right here. We're going to go and vote for some stuff. People are so funny. Kimberly says, yeah, because third parties have been wildly successful. Not at all. Liberty Cipher, your third party only helps Democrats push us further to socialism. Clandestine, we already did that. It's called MAGA. They seem to be split, by the way. Courtney. Third way politics has failed every time, and we're not interested in building the technate. Last comment from Sadie here. Love you, Elon, but third parties only pull from conservatives. We need to change the GOP into a truly conservative party, not create a new one. There's some interesting thoughts there. I have an interesting thought. I want you to listen to this clip of Ron DeSantis talking. Governor Ron DeSantis. What does he have to do with the third party? Well, why don't you take a listen here real quick? Because I think this is great.
What he's done. The problem is when you do another party, especially if you're running on some of the issues that he talks about, that would end up, if he funds Senate candidates and House candidates in competitive races, that would likely end up meaning the Democrats would win all the competitive Senate and House races. And so, look,
Okay. So he's echoing what a lot of people have said. They're like, dude, you're going to hand the country back to the Democrats. Okay. So let's keep listening because I got a point we're going to get to.
Republican, I don't want to see that happen. I think if you want to, get involved and hold accountable, we do have a problem in the Republican Party with these DC congressmen. They always run saying there's out of control spending and they're going to spend less, and they never do it.
That's weird. So now Ron DeSantis is acknowledging there is a problem in the Republican Party in Washington, D.C., that they tell you one thing and they do another. That's a problem. And he said it's in the GOP, right? So he's echoing the concern. Hey, you're going to hand the country over to the Dems, but we also have problems in the GOP. People don't care about spending. They just vote whatever.
And so there's a gap between the campaign rhetoric and then the performance. Elon was doing Doge, and a lot of Congress didn't want anything to do with actually adopting the Doge
right
cuts, just like they haven't wanted to adopt the Trump executive orders on immigration and all these other things, which I think you have to adopt in law if you want them to have staying power. So I think there is a lot of frustration with the gap between the rhetoric in their district and the performance once they get into DC.
Okay, he is correct. There is a gap between their rhetoric and their performance. And Americans are getting tired of it. Now, not tired enough, because we're not really doing anything about it so much. Like, not voting these people back in. That could always happen. We can go to our primaries. If you're a Republican and you're upset, you go to your primary and you say, come hell or high water, we're getting this guy out. And we're going to give somebody brand new a chance. And we're going to tell them, don't mess it up. Okay? And we're getting to the good part of DeSantis's little speech here. Now, this is a public press conference. He's the governor, and he's talking about politics in Washington, D.C.
But the way you do that is expose that in a primary and show that there's another way forward. Honestly, if you're concerned about the debt, I wouldn't even worry about that, because I don't think just electing a few better people is going to change the trajectory.
Here it comes.
We need the incentives in Washington are going to lead to these outcomes, really, regardless of the outcome of elections at this point. So you need to do a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and you can do that through the states. You can do it through Article 5. We've got 28 states that have approved this. There's another 4 or 5 that are on the docket. Once you hit 34, then you write an amendment, and then the states are able to ratify that. You need 3/4. If Elon wanted to weigh in on that and work on those state legislatures, he would have a monumental impact on doing this. And
okay. So What did you hear? Why? Like, let me phrase my question a little differently. Did you notice anything there in contradiction to all the complaints about third parties are ineffective? Ron DeSantis, the governor, a Republican, came out and acknowledged and said, "Hey, there are problems in the Republican Party, and we need to handle them at the primary, when it's time to go and do primaries." Right? Okay. Then he did something interesting. He gave Elon a suggestion of what he could do that would be, in his mind, more effective. What this tells me is that all of those people who said third parties are ineffective are wrong. Number one, they contradict themselves, because if if third parties give the other team a win, then they are effective at something, right? And presumably a third party wants to win. So the way I look at it from a libertarian perspective, I say, if the Libertarian Party covers the spread between the Republican and the Democrat in a race, and they cause one or the other to lose, well, think of it this way. Our party has made half of its goal. Its goal was to win by running a candidate, right? Win the seat. But if they don't win, but they cause one of the other teams to lose by taking some of the votes, then that means they got halfway to their goal. So let's just say that a Republican wins. Let's say that we steal Democrat votes in a particular election. You know what? Screw it. Let's just do it the other way around. Let's say the Democrat wins in a particular election because a lot of the Republicans that were voting were like, yeah, I'd kind of rather have this libertarian. And so they didn't vote for the Republican, and the Republican lost. And we can look at the numbers and see that had the libertarians not, run a candidate, then those votes would have, potentially went to, the Republican. It's not a guarantee, but they would have potentially. And so let's assume for a moment that happened. Okay, what that means is the Democrats came in first place because they won. The Libertarians actually came in second place because they won one, they beat one, lost to another, right? Like think of it that way. Because what is the goal? The goal is to get to the seat, to get the seat. So I guess you should probably say it like this: the Democrats won the seat. The Libertarians prevented the Republicans. They prevented one of the other two from getting that seat, even though they didn't win it. And the Republicans didn't prevent anybody from getting the seat because they didn't win it. So you see how I'm structuring this? So you've got Democrats, Libertarians, and Republicans in this particular scenario. So no, they are effective. But more to the point, what we heard out of DeSantis was he was giving suggestions. Elon made a poll on Twitter, which we don't even know how many Americans actually participated in the poll versus people that were outside of the United States who are not eligible to vote. Okay, so we don't know if like 600,000 people in the United States voted, who are eligible voters, and then the other 600,000, because it was about 1 million too. The other 600,000 were people from India or some other country, right? China chiming in, whatever. We don't know that. We don't know the breakdown of that. But nonetheless, based on just him suggesting and saying, we're going to start a brand new party, Republicans are already out trying to do damage control and say, whoa. If you do this, you're going to cause us to lose some seats. Yes, that's one possible outcome. That's how politics works, right? And then they're coming out and they're like, why don't you do this instead? Elon Musk, in just days, literally days, he didn't even do anything. He just literally posted, made a comment, and said, we're going to do this. That's it. He hasn't actually done anything just yet. I think technically there's a filing out there, but he hasn't actually done anything. He hasn't raised a whole bunch of money. He hasn't identified candidates that he's going to run. He hasn't divulged any strategy. He hasn't done any of that. He just literally said, we're going to start a brand new party. And now Republicans are scrambling to say, can you try something else instead? Can you do this? Please don't, because you're going to ruin the election for us. That's power, folks. That's what the Libertarian Party should be able to do. Maybe not on the scale that Elon Musk can do, because like he's like what, the richest man in the world, second richest at worst, but he's at least one of those two. So he has money, plenty of money, and he could accomplish a lot in politics all by his lonesome. Okay. And it would be in that particular regard, it's unfair to compare him to the Libertarian Party. We're a third party. We simply could not raise the kind of capital that he has made over many decades, on the free market. So it's a different aspect in terms of money, but it does show you the power that he has. Not he has, but the power that third parties have. They know that a third party can make it difficult to get elected, that they're going to have to do something different. And when was the last time anybody got out and said, I see the Libertarian Party is running a candidate for this position, this Senate position, this House position, presidential nominee, governor, whatever. Please don't. Please do it. Please do this instead. You'll be more effective. Whether or not you'll be more effective is not really the point. The point is Elon has Republicans already trying to do damage control. And if the Libertarians had their act together and functioned as a proper party that wanted to win, we could, at least at times, get their attention. Would it be in the same way with maybe not. I mean, are we going to be able to get the attention of a governor to come out and say, hey, don't primary everybody in Congress? No, it would work differently and they would say something different. But the point being, we should look at ourselves and be kind of hanging our head in shame that we don't have Republicans necessarily coming out and grandstanding, making speeches about what we ought to do instead of what we're planning on doing. That's power. Third parties have power. So every one of those people were wrong. Like, not in the sense that like third parties can fail massively, but they can be powerful if they're being used correctly. And oftentimes they're not. So Elon has just showed you that, yes, there is a value add. And once we get past the psychological barrier of, but what if the other guy wins? What if we get past that? Once we get past that, if we even can, then what that means is we can break from the stranglehold of, I think it's Duverger's, I can't remember his name, but Duverger's law. Basically the law that says that you're going to have a two-party system and that third parties just get squeezed out. Part of that is psychological because a lot of people, they'll do that very thing. They'll say, oh, if a third party candidate runs, I can't vote for them because what if the Democrat wins? What if the Republican wins? Right. And so then they go back to what's comfortable. Once we can, if possible, once we can get past that, then we could actually be powerful. And we can already see that it looks like Elon has already figured out how to get past that, right? He's like, look, I did all this work and Congress rejected it. So now we're going to take a different approach. And a lot of people are cheering him on, including people in the Libertarian Party, because unlike the big two, people in third parties tend to be more welcoming of more third parties because we get it. We're cool with the idea of competing. We don't have a problem with that. It's the big two that don't want to compete. They want to play like many businesses do, where a big, like say maybe a big chain restaurant will support some legislation. They'll go, this is totally for the safety of everybody. This is a good thing. Well, what it does is it increases the cost of people that are smaller than them, that don't have the capital and the resources and the name that they have, that they've acquired over many years, right? So it makes it more difficult for them. But it's easy if you've got a big business, you're making millions already, blah, 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 you're already pretty well settled in, and then some new requirement comes out and, for your business, well, it's easy for you to say, okay, we'll just incorporate that into what we already do. It's going to cost a little bit of money, but we will be fine. We'll raise our prices or something simple, right? We'll figure out, we'll cut heads, we'll do something. Smaller businesses don't necessarily have all those options available to them. So a new piece of legislation, a new requirement could put them out of business. It's the same way in politics. They add all these rules and they basically, quote unquote, put the third parties out of business by keeping them out of the debates. Okay. Because they know that third parties can cost them the election. So yes, third parties are a value add, and you should learn to support them. Let's go to the comments here. See what you guys are saying. We'll go to intermission and we'll come back. Let's see what we got in here. I'm going to skim through these kind of quickly. Let's see here. Super excited for Larry Sharp to be on the show. Everything, Mom Donnie. Larry is in the belly of the beast. If anyone can have this convo, it's Larry Sharp. I look forward to it. It's going to be awesome. And I've been doing my research on Mom Donnie, and keep an eye out for when I post the clips of him. Now, each show is like the first show was like 2.5 hours, and then the one I did Sunday night was like an hour and a half, I think. And I actually cut that down. So it's going to be a long running series because I'm literally walking through every one of his proposals. Not Joe who said my Congress member is Randy Fine. Somebody hand Joe a tissue. I'm sorry, bro. I really am. He's a despicable human being. Of all congressmen that I would say the most vile things about, he's at the top of the list. Oh, what a terrible person. But DL, MAGA tells me that Massie doesn't fight Dems as much as he fights Trump. Oh, no, he does. What he does actually is he fights for liberty and doing things the right way and what his constituents have asked him to do. That's why they keep voting him. Let's see. I stand grandly with Massie. I like it. Let's see. Not Joe says, Don Bacon sounds like a great Italian-themed bacon restaurant. Maybe. Something like, on this, the day of my bacon's birth. I don't know. Sorry. This is so corny. All right. Let's see. Keith says, we are the victim. We are the victim. We are. The American people are the victim. Oddsman, thank you for joining. DL, snakes are much more useful than politicians. That's true. That is true. Let's see here. What else we got in here? Let's see. Oh no, Oddsman says I'm unable to get Rumble to work. No worries. I understand. Do the best you can. But I appreciate you nonetheless. It's like all the, however you're contributing to this show, whether you're jumping in on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, all of that contributes to the success of the show. We are just making a little bit more of a push on Rumble because they are the ones that, I'm in that program and they happen to have very specific requirements. Whereas the other platforms currently, they don't have, I'm not bound by specific requirements in order to maintain in a program. They do have requirements for me to reach certain thresholds and stuff like that. So it does contribute to the show one way or another. So I appreciate all of it. Let's see here. DL, can the parties not bypass the primary? Dems, Kamala. I mean, I'm just saying, they're all corrupt. And then people are like, but no, don't create a new one. Eventually the new one will be corrupt, but at least maybe it'll have a good run in the beginning. Let's see. How many illegals voted in the Elon poll? I don't know. Probably millions upon millions. All right, folks, let's go to a quick break here and then we'll come back and we'll talk about something a little bit more on the controversial side. Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back. So I want to talk about something that's a little more on the controversial side. So I'm going to put something up on the screen here. Remember this. This was a while back. This is I don't remember the date specifically. Let's declare a pandemic amnesty. Let's focus on the future and fix the problems we still need to solve, by Emily Oster. Okay, so Emily wrote this article, and basically the gist of it is, hey, a lot of people, they didn't really know, they didn't really know how bad things would turn out based on the decisions that they supported during COVID, the lockdowns, the mandates, and so on and so forth. And yeah, some of us were pretty mean, but we realized the error of our ways, and let's just have amnesty, right? And then a lot of people were like, no, no amnesty. Now, what I had said at the time is I was like, look, if you are a regular everyday person, you're a cashier at the local grocery store, and you supported the lockdowns, I'm willing to give you amnesty. Why? Well, you're just a regular person, and I can see the argument that maybe you didn't know any better, right? You're just an average person. You're going with the government tells you. Maybe you didn't have the time to dig in deep enough. Maybe you don't understand, data and statistics. And so you couldn't look at it and say, something doesn't seem right here. There's any number of reasons, and that's fine. I'm not going to hold that against you. Now, if you are somebody in power, well, then that's a different story, because now you're expected to know this information and you were actively imposing and utilizing that power. So I objected, to the idea of saying no, but also not. I also objected to the idea that everybody gets a pass. I was like, it depends on who you are, right? And if you're a regular, everyday, average person, and you were pretty vile and nasty to, like, say, your neighbor, well, then you owe them an apology, right? And you need to figure out how to make restitution with that person. But and so I wouldn't say that you need amnesty in that particular context. I would just say you need to go talk to them and figure out and say, hey, look, I was an idiot. I'm sorry. Let's try to repair this, this relationship. Okay. And so I'm cool with a little bit of, amnesty, or whatever word you want to call it, forgiveness for people that had no power. People that had power, if you were a mayor, if you were a governor, any one of those people, nope, different story now, right? So I'm separating people like that. So then we get to, um, then now we're at Trump, right? He's done a lot of things that people didn't like. So, for instance, we didn't get the Epstein list, right? We're not getting that now. The FBI, they first came out and they said, "Oh man, the video footage was destroyed. Sorry, we can't get it to you." Now they suddenly found it. They were even able to make it like restored and look nice, right? It's got a minute missing. That's kind of weird, but whatever. But we have it. And so they're like, "Oh yeah, the video we told you that didn't exist. Here it is." They also, Pam Bondi, Attorney General Pam Bondi, she was like, hey, I got the files on my desk of all the names of people that are involved. I'm going to be going through that. Okay, great. Now they came out and they're like, yeah, there's no such list. Doesn't exist. These are not the people you're looking for. These are not the pedos you're looking for, right? We're not really getting America first, arguably. We're not getting this, because we don't have the Epstein list. We don't have the spending cuts. The deep state has not been ended. There's no end right now to the war in the Middle East. I mean, yeah, they got a ceasefire, but it's not like a ceasefire, just like a pause. They didn't actually make peace. They didn't actually make a truce. And then now we're hearing, and I don't have the video, but now I've just seen, was it last night? Donald Trump, he came out and he was asked about sending arms to Ukraine, and he's like, "Yeah, we got to send them some more. They're having a rough time." Oh, okay. So we haven't ended that war. Okay, we got Massie as the enemy. Massie, who is literally the one of the very few congressmen that will come out and say, "I voted for this," or "I didn't vote for this. Here's why," and then you can judge me for my rationale. Right? He's very straightforward and honest, and he cares about reduced government. He cares about not spending. Whenever he votes against spending bill, it's always because, hey, we can't afford it. That's literally what he says. He's like, we can't afford it. Right. So he's being mindful of taxpayer money, yet he is the enemy. Massie is everything that Trump ran to be, effectively. More than that, actually. But like all the fiscal conservatism and all that good stuff, ending wars, all that, that's what Massie is. Massie is what Donald Trump ran on. But what do we get instead? just to name a few things. We got Real ID, which I realize was in the works for many years. However, it's been delayed repeatedly, and they could have delayed it again, but they chose not to. So we got Real ID. Like they could have revoked it. They could have, Congress could have went back and said, yeah, it was actually a bad idea, or maybe at the time it was a good idea, but we no longer need it. Whatever, right? They could have done something, but they chose to let it be implemented. So now we have Real ID. We got the Palantir database, right? That's basically a system that's going to reach out to all these different systems, pull in the information, and then be able to be used for who knows what. I mean, we're hearing that it's going to be for only good purposes right now, but that's not how things play out. With government, it always starts out as admirable, right? Maybe not even always, but frequently you'll see something. It's like, oh, yeah, that's not so bad. Yeah, you should probably go after that. But then they're like, well, now that we went after that, now that there's no more to go after, guess we got to put this thing to use. So yeah, we'll go to the next person in line. That's a little bit lower. That's not who we initially intended it to be, but we got to reach out. Just like our income tax. Income tax, once upon a time, was supposed to be for the wealthiest people. But guess who's paying income tax now? That's right. Everybody. Everybody's paying for it, right? Because what they said was, okay, well, we've got what we can get out of these guys. We're going to have to move to the next level below them, and then the next level below them. And then eventually, everybody now is paying their income tax. What else did we get? We got bombing Iran. Like the president literally ran on this idea of no more wars, and he bombed another country. Now, I know a lot of the sycophants, they'll be like, oh, well, they were just about to deploy this nuclear weapon that they've been working on for 20 years, that they were just weeks away from having for 20 years. Okay? There's a lot of holes in that. And so the likelihood is that, number one, they probably weren't even close to having a bomb ready. Whether or not they were working on one is arguable, right? People could argue either way. I think they probably were. But working on something and having something ready are not the same. Okay. Second of all, it seems like we may not have actually destroyed it. There's some question there. To what extent did we destroy what they were working on? Okay. Well, if we didn't destroy it, if they somehow got word and they moved it and it's not destroyed, now guess what? We've just given them more reason to have one and another reason to retaliate against us sometime in the future. Now, will Iran go toe to toe with us on a military level? I don't know. I would think they wouldn't, but would they potentially use terrorism? Yes, they have before. Why would you stoke that flame unless you were absolutely sure, hey, their president has got his finger right over the button to push it because it's that ready. But that's not what we were told. We were told that they were working on it, and then there were questions or that they were just weeks away. Okay? I don't know how you make that judgment they're weeks away. What else did we get? We got $1 trillion military budget. Hooray. So we got all these things. So you can't tell me that we got America first from Donald Trump. Okay? So now, where am I going with this? How does this fit with amnesty? So a lot of people are coming out and they're like, I regret my vote for Trump. That's fair. I have no problem with that. You got fooled. Did he talk a good game? Did he give you the right rhetoric? Sure did. And I get why people wanted to support him. I understand. I disagree, but I understand. Right? My argument at the time, you can go back and look at my tweets. What I'd said was, hey, if you don't believe that Chase Oliver, the Libertarian candidate, has earned your vote, and you believe that Trump or Kamala Harris has earned your vote, or somebody else, there were other smaller parties as well, then fine, vote for that person. Everybody has to earn your vote. That's how it works. And if for whatever reason, any reason, they didn't earn your vote, then fine. I don't have to agree with your reasons, but that's cool. Like, we're okay with that. But what I said at the time, I was like, look, you're an enemy to liberty if you make a big deal over me voting for Chase or for somebody not voting for Trump. And a lot of people did. A lot of libertarians did, right? They went beyond just saying, this person has earned my vote, this person has not. They went and they said all kind of mean things. They're like, oh, you're just addicted to losing, right? You're afraid of relevance, all these good things. Well, let me just kind of remember, how's that relevance working out for you? Because you didn't get us the Epstein list. You didn't get us spending cuts. You didn't get an end to the deep state. You didn't end the Middle East war. You didn't end the Ukraine war. Thomas Massie, who we pretty much all love, as far as in the libertarian community, he's now considered the enemy again, right? Not only by Trump, but by MAGA at large. So how's that relevance working out? It's not. Okay. So what ended up happening is a lot of people are like, yeah, I regret. Now, are they begging for mercy and amnesty? No, but it's worth thinking about that after COVID, people joined on to bad ideas and then turned around and wanted to be, they wanted to, have forgiveness and say, yeah, sorry about that. And people were like, no forgiveness for you. So should I be that way with people who voted for Trump? I say probably not. I say it's probably a bad idea. So here's what let's continue what I had said. So here's that pandemic amnesty. So I recently said this. I said post-COVID, those who supported lockdowns wanted amnesty, saying they didn't know new information, etc. The response was firmly hell no by those who opposed lockdowns. Makes me think of libertarians who voted for Trump, who are now upset over tariffs, bombing Iran. I missed the tariffs in my list there. Massie, the big beautiful bill, and Epstein, among other things. Then I went on and I said, follow up. I personally think those of us who could say that we haven't any regrets rejecting the COVID vaccine. Remember how many people came out and they were like, I have no regrets for any of my positions during COVID, whereas some of the people do regret it. And there are even some people who regret taking the vaccine because they got injured by it, right? So of those who could say they haven't any regrets rejecting the COVID vaccine and not voting Trump should refrain. So a lot of people got on their high horse after COVID and they said, I didn't support the lockdowns, or they said, I didn't get vaccinated, right? They were thumping their chest. Look how right I was. Okay. Many of those same people went on to vote for Trump, but you're not beating your chest now, are you? But somebody like me, who could have come out and said, well, I didn't get the vaccine and I didn't support the lockdowns, so I could have beat my chest, but I didn't. And now I can look and say, well, I didn't vote for the guy who is refusing to give us the Epstein list, isn't putting America first, isn't giving us spending cuts, isn't ending the deep state, isn't ending the war in the Middle East or in Ukraine. And he's made Thomas Massie the enemy. And we've gotten Real ID, Palantir. We've bombed Iran, $1 trillion military budget. Like, I didn't vote for that guy. So I could come out and I could go, I'm better than everybody who could only say one of those two things, right? That's how the game is being played. But then I go on and I say, but it's easier if those who proudly ran around demanding no amnesty, political leaders the exception, remember, if you're in leadership, it's a different story, humbled themselves as well. So if you guys would humble yourself a little bit, I would appreciate that. And I don't think you need to come groveling to us, right? Those of us that got 2 check marks, I don't think we should be asking those of you who have 1 check mark and 1 X or 2 X's in these particular elements that you should necessarily come groveling to us for forgiveness. I don't think you need amnesty. That would be silly. Okay. I just think that you need to change your behavior and perhaps be a little bit more humble. There's a useful lesson here. I go on to say there's a useful lesson here for the liberty community if they're willing to receive it. So I think there is a useful lesson. That's be humble, because you can be wrong. Be humble in the very beginning, be humble in the middle, and be humble after. Yeah, you could brag that you didn't take the vaccine, and so therefore you didn't get injured like some other people did. You could brag that you didn't support lockdowns like some other people did. But you all of a sudden now can't brag about all these terrible things that are happening under the Trump administration that you voted for. You voted for him. Now, you might like to say, well, I didn't vote for all of that. Well, the same can be said of people in COVID. Many of them could say, well, I supported lockdowns, but I didn't support the nastiness that came with it. Or I only supported them in, to a certain degree, right? They could do the same thing. They could easily come back and say, well, I didn't support all of it. Just like you're trying to say, I didn't support all of it, only the good stuff that happened. I don't support any of the bad stuff. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Nobody supports the bad stuff. Everybody always says, I don't support the bad stuff. Like that's a given. That's not a win for you. Okay? So the lesson here is to be humble. Now, why? Here's the thing. Number one, many of the people that supported lockdowns and were and particularly vicious during COVID, they have not learned their lesson. So they are potentially going to be doing it again should we ever have a similar situation. What does that mean? That means those of us who were not supportive of lockdowns and maybe were not nasty to other people who wanted just to go out and buy some groceries or whatever, right? If we're humble, we can work with each other and be prepared for the next time when our fellow man loses their minds. Okay? But we got to be a little bit humble about this because we got to be able to work with each other. And a lot of you were particularly nasty to people that voted for Chase Oliver or even somebody else. And you're like, if somebody didn't vote for Trump, they were the bad guy for many of you, not all of you. Some of you did hold and say, look, I disagree with your vote, but it's your vote and I get it. Go ahead and vote how you feel is appropriate for you. Some of you were like that. To you, kudos. But many of you, you voted for Trump. You got all this crap. And now you should have your head in shame. But more importantly, because I'm not really looking to shame people so much, more importantly, you should learn to be a little humble and be like, you know what? I got that wrong. I apologize. Right? We don't need a long drawn out apology. We're not groveling. Just like I apologize, and I'm going to do better. The next time that somebody says, "Don't vote for this candidate," you're going to get more of the same. You can still vote for them, but you should be like, "Look, DL, I hear what you're saying, but I feel like this one might be the right one. They may be the one, and that's fine. Like I have no issue with that. Right? It's the attitude that matters to me." Because then we can still more easily work together. But if you are nasty to me, then what does that mean in the future when you need me? I might not be willing to help you. So now let me get to the particularly controversial part. If that wasn't controversial enough, think about amnesty with illegal immigrants. Now it's looking like Trump is going to offer some sort of immunity, some sort of amnesty, at least for service workers and for people working in agriculture. Okay, and he might do more. Who knows? We'll see what plays out. It's not. I mean, he's still deporting people, but it looks like there's some amnesty on the horizon that may come about, and things could change. Like even if there isn't amnesty now, things could change. So I want you to think about something. If you're nasty to immigrants who their only crime is administrative, that means they didn't get permission to come here, or they got permission, but then the permission ended on a certain date and they overstayed their visa, or they're no longer legally permitted to be here, but they came legally, but they overstayed, right? So you have two scenarios. Those are administrative. It's just paperwork. It's like, hey, can I get permission? Right? That's all that is. There's no actual crime there. Because again, government, you cannot commit a crime against the government. Okay? So if they end up staying here long term, and politically you need them on your side, what do you suppose will happen? Do you suppose that if you were nasty about getting them deported, that they're going to be too willing to help you? So a lot of people like make this argument. They're like, well, the illegals are just going to vote for the Democrats. They're just going to increase the numbers for the Dems. And maybe that's true. But eventually they're going to do things like, presumably come out of the shadows. They will maybe get naturalized. They'll become voters. If nothing else, they will at least pay taxes, and they'll help make arguments. Maybe they'll go to protest about different topics, maybe things that you agree with or disagree with, whatever, right? But they're going to start engaging in society in some way. Do you want them engaging with you or against you? Because if you're against them now and you're showing them no hospitality, and I don't mean that in the religious sense where people point out the Bible verse and they're like, oh, you're supposed to. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just in general. Like just as like, hey, you're somebody here from another country. I'm going to treat you the best that I possibly can. Right? Now, that could include, hey, Jose, I understand that you're here illegally. and that's the only crime that you've committed. But we have laws, and we have to enforce them. And I feel bad sending you back home, but we have to do things the right way. If that was your attitude, then you would be a better American. But many Americans right now, their attitude is to be like, ah, ha, ha, get them out, deport them, get rid of all of them. They're all terrible people. They're lawbreakers, right? And there seems to be no regard for, what if I need this person on my side in the future? What if they don't get removed? What if they end up staying here a very long time and become part of the process? How's that going to work out? You are literally going to create a political enemy by acting like a jackass today. When I started this podcast, part of my motivation and my tagline early on was preparing for tomorrow's conversation by how we engage today. I want people with me tomorrow, which means today I have to not treat them poorly. And you can even enforce the rule of law as it exists right now without being a jerk about it. Right? You could have supported lockdowns without being particularly, being too much of a jerk about it. You could have said, look, I think this is the right thing to do. Nobody should go anywhere until we get a good sense of what's going on. And you could have wrapped your idea, your support in language that said, look, I think this is the right thing to do. We don't want people to get sick. I'm not trying to be a jerk to you. I'm not going to try to turn you in. I'm not going to do all these nasty things and tell you that you're killing grandma because you went outside. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to say I support this. You can support things without being a jerk about it. And then later, it makes it easier for you to come and go, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Can we work together going forward? But it's a lot harder for people to say, yes, I'll work with you if you were a jerk to them early on. So that applies for COVID. That applies for voting for Donald Trump. That applies for immigration. Basically, anything where you can say, I made the better choice and you didn't, you should probably do it with a little bit of humility. And if you do that, our country will be just a little bit better. Because at the end of the day, there are times where we do need to work together. If you don't like Real ID or Palantir or the idea of bombing other countries, if you would rather have a spending bill, cut down into, 12 different bills like it should be. The way that happens is when we work together. Because when we're separated like this, and much of it our own doing, that gives representatives basically leadership control. That gives them power. Because who are they going to have to answer to? No major group is opposing them. Just a bunch of small groups that can't seem to get their act together and come together as a group big enough to say, knock it off. The reason that Elon Musk can have the effect that he has with the idea of America Party is because he has so much resources at his disposal that he's kind of like a bunch of small people all put together in one, right? On the money side, he is basically a whole bunch of people all in one. So he can strike a little bit of fear in the hearts of politicians. People, they only have it, and I'm going to use the word that libertarians hate, they only have that kind of power collectively. And we can't be that collective when we need to be. We don't always need to be a collective. There's a time and a place for everything. But when we want our government under control, we need to band together, which first requires not being a jerk to each other. So hopefully that wasn't too controversial. Personally, I think that we should give as many people amnesty for their wrong dealings as we can, whether it's for voting for Trump, whether it's voting for Trump, whether it's lockdowns, whether it's illegal immigration. At the end of the day, those are things that people don't want to have happen, right? And it's easier to get that person who didn't want to have happen to be on your side, right? Or for them to get you to be on their side later if they weren't a jerk for you, to you. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, I would grant immunity, or not immunity, amnesty to as many people as possible. Not leaders. That's a different story. Leadership, they're in leadership. They have power. They should learn how to be accountable for the power that they wield. And so they should have the facts. But a lot of people that are not in power, they're probably just going along trying to make the best decision that they can. And it's an easier sell to say that you made a mistake if you weren't a jerk. So hopefully I've repeated that enough that it gets through to you. That's my show. Let's check out some comments. Let's see what else you guys are saying, and then we're going to head on out. Let's see here. Kagela says, chatter, chatter, chatter for Mr. Al Gore, the item. Thank you so much there, Kagela. Appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that's tuning in. And you know, I got to check the other socials, make sure. Okay, we're good. What else? Are you going to provide amnesty reparations out of your own pocket, not taxes, for those who said no to the social compliance feasibility study? Well, I'm not familiar with the social compliance feasibility study, so I can't say amnesty. All I'm talking about is basically forgiveness for when somebody comes to their senses and says, you know what, DL, you were right. I shouldn't have voted for this. I shouldn't have supported this. I was wrong. I apologize. And I can see now, where that mistake was. And hopefully, and again, it doesn't have to be this long drawn out, just like, hey, I got it wrong, buddy, but let's work together for a better future. Okay, great. You weren't a jerk to me. You did get it wrong. And that's cool. We all get it wrong at some point. You weren't a jerk to me. Yes, I would love to work with you for a better future. That's ultimately what I'm saying. In terms of like reparations and payment, you only owe somebody money if you've defrauded them, you've stolen money, or in some way that you have caused them to lose money directly. But otherwise, I'm going to say probably not so much. But DL, it's to protect the children. Isn't that always the argument? Like, well, we got to do this for the children. Think of the children. The children that we're not having, by the way. Just point that out. We're like, oh, no, we're not having enough children. Well, there goes that argument. Think of the children, DL. What children? People aren't having any. I don't have to think about them anymore. DL did the meme. We literally voted for this. In a way, yes. Like, people want to absolve themselves and say, it's not what I voted for. That may not be the reason why you chose to vote for that person. But you voted for somebody knowing that they might do certain things. And there are certain things for which could have easily been speculated. You could have had the foresight said, they're probably going to do. If you believe the military industrial complex is massive and has its tentacles in everything, then it should have been no surprise to you that the U.S. that Donald Trump bombed Iran. It should have been no surprise to you that we're continuing to fund, Israel and Ukraine and other countries in terms of defense and whatnot, right? Like for military purposes. I mean, that should be no surprise to you. You shouldn't be like, wow, that's not what I voted for. You should be like, yes, I knew they were probably going to do that because I believed that the military industrial complex and that the swamp was so bad that one person wasn't going to come in and just magically wave a wand and it all go away. But if you can't say that, then maybe you shouldn't even be voting. Like if you're like, no, I was really surprised by this, maybe you shouldn't vote anymore. Just saying. But yeah, basically people did vote for this and they should be held accountable. Now, if it's something totally out of nowhere that nobody was talking about, nobody speculated on, and you're like, that I didn't see that one coming. Well, then, yeah, we could say I didn't vote for that. Like I think we should be reasonable. We should say, okay, you could have reasonably predicted this, but not this. That's fair. But there's plenty that you could have reasonably predicted. So therefore, you're still held accountable. Okay. But again, I'm looking at it like, were you a jerk? If you weren't a jerk, let me put it this way. If you weren't a jerk to me in COVID times, but you supported lockdowns, I'm willing to forgive you pretty easily. If you weren't a jerk to me and you voted for Trump, right? And then now you regret it, I'm willing to forgive you if that even is necessary. If you came to this country illegally, but you weren't a jerk to me and you didn't do anything wrong, like you didn't go assault somebody, you didn't steal stuff, you literally just came here, got a job, pay your bills, to the extent that you can, pay taxes, right? If you did all that, you're basically being a good person to me. And so therefore I'm willing to work with you and help you out. That's the attitude that we should have. That is what would make America great. Okay? And so, yes, I literally voted for this. A lot of people, they would love saying that early on. But then all of a sudden, when Trump started doing things that they didn't like, they're like, well, that's not what I voted for. Mm-mm. Nope. If you could have predicted it, you should be held accountable for it. All right, let's see. Osman says, as the late cypherpunk Tim May once said, protect the children is the root passphrase to the Constitution. That is a great comment. I love that. It is absolutely. Protect the children is like, it opens up the Constitution for anything you want, if I understand this correctly. And not that it should be open, but it's just like, it's like a magic key. Like, it just like, bing, there it is. You get whatever you want. Absolutely. All right. DL, Trump admin allowed us common folk to not have to take our shoes off at TSA. Trump 2028. Woo! All right. Of course, he's joking. All right, folks. That's my show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. I will see you tomorrow for another show in the morning, and then tomorrow at 11 a.m. for Larry Sharp. Tune in. It's going to be a great show. So until then, thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.